The hospital smelled of antiseptic, rain, and fear. Elena Davenport sat on a hard plastic chair outside room 304, her palms pressed tightly around a paper cup of cold coffee. Her eyes were red and swollen not from crying, but from not crying. It was the kind of exhaustion that numbed even grief. Inside, the faint rhythm of heart monitors pulsed in steady defiance of death. When the nurse finally said, "Mrs. Davenport, he's awake," Elena's cup slipped from her hand. It hit the tiled floor, splashing lukewarm coffee over her shoes, but she didn't care. Her world had just flickered back to life. She ran through the sterile corridor, her heels clattering against the floor, her chest burning with hope and fear. Then she stopped. Ethan Davenport, her husband, the man she had loved for 7 years, the billionaire who once built towers that touched clouds, was sitting upright in the hospital bed. Pale. Bruised. Alive. Their eyes met. For one suspended second, the world held its breath. "Ethan," her voice cracked. She rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she reached for him. He looked at her, no recognition, no warmth, just confusion. "I'm sorry," he said softly, his tone polite, distant. "Who are you?" Her hand froze in midair. The room seemed to tilt. "What?" He frowned, as if she'd spoken in another language. "Do I know you?" Her heart stuttered. She tried to laugh, to brush it off as shock, but her throat tightened. "Ethan, it's me. Elena." The doctor's voice filled the silence, explaining, temporary amnesia, head trauma, possible memory gaps. But Elena didn't hear anything after that. Her gaze stayed locked on Ethan's face, the same familiar face that had once been her home. He looked at her kindly, almost apologetically. And in that kindness was the cruelest truth of all: he didn't remember her. When the nurse adjusted his fore, Elena stepped back, her breathing shallow. The walls closed in. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to remind him of every moment they'd shared. But she couldn't. Because how do you fight a loss that isn't death, but something worse? That night, she stood by his bed long after visiting hours ended. The machines hummed softly, casting green light across his sleeping face. Elena brushed her fingers against his, whispering through tears, "I found you once. I'll find you again." Outside, rain began to fall, the same rain that had followed them since their first date. She didn't believe in coincidences. She believed in love. And love, she promised herself, would bring him back. 2 weeks later, the Davenports' mansion felt colder than ever. Once, it had been filled with music and laughter, jazz echoing through the marble halls, her laughter bouncing off the chandelier as Ethan twirled her across the living room floor. Now, it was silent. Ethan walked through each room like a tourist in a museum of someone else's life. The butler greeted him with practiced warmth. "Welcome home, sir." Ethan nodded. "Thank you, though it doesn't really feel like home." Elena followed behind him, her heart breaking at how foreign everything seemed to him. He paused in front of the grand staircase, staring at a framed photograph, their wedding picture. His arm wrapped around her waist, her veil flowing in the wind, both of them radiant with joy. "That's us?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, stepping beside him. "That was our wedding day. In Florence." He tilted his head, studying it. "We look happy." Elena's lips trembled. "We were. Very." He smiled faintly, then turned away, and in that small movement, she saw the distance between them stretch wider. Dinner was quiet that night. Elena set the table with the same care she always had: his favorite wine, his usual place setting, the candlelight he used to say made her eyes glow like gold. He ate slowly, mechanically. "You cooked?" he asked. She nodded. "I remembered what you liked." "I'm sorry," he said, setting down his fork. "I wish I could appreciate that the way I used to." Her chest tightened. "You will," she whispered. "One day." After dinner, she caught him standing at the doorway of their bedroom, staring at the king-sized bed they once shared. He hesitated, then turned away and disappeared down the hall to the guest room. Elena sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at the space he'd left behind. The air still smelled faintly of him, sandalwood and storm. She pressed her face into his pillow and let the tears finally come. Down the hall, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He didn't understand the ache in his chest or why he kept hearing her voice echo in his head. He didn't know her, and yet, her sadness haunted him. He didn't remember their love. But some part of him could still feel it. Days blurred into weeks. Ethan's memory therapy was slow and exhausting. Photographs, journals, even old videos failed to light a spark. Everything felt like watching someone else's movie. One afternoon, he wandered into the garden, her sanctuary. Elena was there, kneeling by the roses, hands covered in soil, strands of hair clinging to her damp forehead. He stood watching her for a moment, strangely drawn to the peaceful rhythm of her movements. "You don't have to do that yourself," he said finally. She looked up, smiling softly. "I like taking care of things that grow." He hesitated, then crouched beside her. "Even if they have thorns?" She met his eyes, her smile fading. "Especially then." They worked in silence for a while. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth and roses. When she accidentally pricked her finger on a thorn, he instinctively grabbed her hand. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," she said. But he didn't let go. His thumb brushed against her skin, his brow furrowing with something like concern. Familiarity. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, something flickered in his gaze. Recognition. Then he blinked, and it was gone. He released her hand. "Sorry. That was strange." "It's okay," she said softly, even though it wasn't. That night, she found him sitting in the darkened living room, a half-finished glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're awake," she said, stepping closer. "I couldn't sleep," he murmured. "I keep having dreams I can't remember. Just feelings. Like someone's calling my name." Her breath caught. "Maybe that's your memory trying to come back." He turned to her, eyes searching hers. "Or maybe it's you." Silence hung between them. The kind that said more than words ever could. He stood and walked past her, pausing only to whisper, "I wish I remembered what it felt like to love you." Elena's tears fell before the door even closed. But later that night, she found him asleep on the couch again. His face looked peaceful, almost like before. She covered him with a blanket, brushed his hair from his forehead, and whispered, "You will. I know you will." Outside, thunder rolled through the city, the same sound that once lulled them to sleep together. And though he didn't stir, Ethan's hand twitched, as if reaching for her in his dreams. The storm arrived without warning. A flash split the sky, and a low rumble rolled over the city as if the heavens themselves were remembering something they'd forgotten. Elena stood at the tall windows of the living room, watching the rain swallow the streetlights. Wind howled around the mansion, rattling the doors. Somewhere upstairs, Ethan's voice echoed down the hall. "The generator's down." Darkness flooded the house. The only light came from the fireplace, its orange glow spilling over the marble floor like a heartbeat. "Come downstairs," she called. "It's safer here." A few moments later, he appeared, hair damp, shirt sleeves rolled up. Lightning flashed behind him, outlining his frame in silver. He looked strangely human like this, no suits, no armor, no fortune, just a man. She handed him a candle. Their fingers brushed, he felt the tremor that passed through her and said nothing. They sat across from each other by the fire while the storm raged outside. "It's quiet," he murmured. "Not really," she said. "You just forgot how to listen to the kind of noise that comforts." He tilted his head. "And what's that?" She smiled faintly. "Rain. Breathing. Someone else existing beside you. He studied her face for a long time, then asked, "What did I used to do on nights like this?" "You'd make tea," she said. "And you'd play the piano until I fell asleep on the couch." Something softened in his eyes. "Maybe I could try again." He rose, sat at the grand piano, and let his fingers find the keys. The melody was uneven at first, clumsy, then suddenly, a familiar tune formed. He frowned. "I don't know how I'm doing this." Elena's throat tightened. "Your heart remembers what your mind forgot." The storm outside eased, but inside the room, another storm was quietly breaking. One of rediscovery, of something long buried stirring awake. When the final note faded, he looked at her. "It felt like you were in that song." "I always was," she whispered. For the first time since the accident, he smiled. And for the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to hope. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds, dripping gold over the drenched garden. Elena found Ethan in the kitchen, pouring coffee like he'd done it 1,000 times. He gestured to the cup. "2 sugars, no cream, right?" She froze. "You remembered." "I guessed," he said with a small grin. "Feels right, though." They shared coffee in easy silence, the kind that had been impossible weeks before. Later, he asked, "Tell me something about us." "Something real." So she did. She told him about the tiny cafe where they'd met, how she'd spilled coffee all over his expensive suit and how he'd laughed instead of getting angry. About the nights he worked late just to walk her home. About the miscarriage that nearly broke them, and how he'd held her every night afterward whispering, "We'll try again when the world's kinder." Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. Ethan listened, every word carving emotion into places memory couldn't reach. When she finished, he whispered, "I don't remember any of it, but it hurts like I should." He stood and walked to the study later that day. As he opened a drawer, a stack of letters fell out, his handwriting. One envelope was labeled to Elena, "If I forget." Hands shaking, he unfolded it. "If you're reading this, it means I've lost something precious. Remind me that love is not knowledge, it's recognition. If ever I forget, tell me that loving you was the only thing that ever made sense." He read it twice, then pressed the paper to his chest. Something inside him cracked open. That evening, he found her on the terrace. She was painting the skyline, colors bleeding across the canvas. He placed the letter beside her. "You told me once that love is an act of remembering. I think I just remembered how to begin." Her brush slipped from her hand. The look she gave him was half disbelief, half prayer. And in the long quiet that followed, the air between them shifted from loss to longing. Days turned into a soft pattern again, breakfasts shared, walks through the garden, evenings with music. The mansion began to breathe. Ethan started noticing small things, the way her eyes followed him when she thought he wasn't looking, the gentle hum she made while cooking, the faint scar on her wrist he remembered kissing once. One night, they stood on the balcony watching the city lights pulse like distant stars. He said quietly, "Every time I try to remember, I see flashes: your laugh, rain, a white dress. It feels like pieces of another life." "It is another life," she said. "One that's still waiting for you to come back." He turned to face her. "Do you ever get tired of waiting?" She smiled through the ache. "Never. Because every time you look at me, I see you getting closer." Something in him gave way. He reached out, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "You still love me." "I never stopped." He leaned forward, hesitant, as if unsure what was allowed. She closed the space between them, soft, trembling, real. The kiss wasn't passion, it was recognition. The slow return of a language both of them once spoke fluently. When they pulled apart, his voice was rough. "My heart knows you, Elena. Even if my mind doesn't." Tears filled her eyes. "Then let your heart lead." They stood like that, two silhouettes against the city, the night wind wrapping around them like memory. That evening, when she fell asleep beside him on the couch, Ethan whispered into her hair, "You make this place feel like home again." And for the first time, he meant it. The morning after the kiss, the world felt lighter. For the first time in months, Ethan woke with a calm that didn't come from medication or therapy. Elena was still asleep beside him on the couch, the early sun tracing soft lines across her face. He watched her breathe. Something inside him whispered, "This is right." He rose quietly, poured coffee, and stared out at the city. Each glimmer of light seemed to tug at something half buried in his mind, flashes of rain, laughter, a white gown swirling against a storm. It was there, just beyond reach. When Elena entered, barefoot and sleepy, he smiled. "I think I dreamed of you." She laughed softly. "You dream of me every night. You just don't know it." He stepped closer. "In the dream we were dancing, outside, maybe. It was raining. I said something to you, something that made you cry, but you were smiling, too." Her hand flew to her mouth. "That was our wedding night." Ethan froze. "So it was real." Her eyes filled. "It was the night you promised you'd never stop choosing me." He reached for her then, but before their hands met, the doorbell shattered the moment. His doctor stood there, file in hand, voice clinical, detached. "Good news, Ethan. The latest scans show progress. But you should know, memories can return unevenly. It can be destabilizing." Destabilizing. The word lingered. That afternoon, Ethan walked the halls of his home like a ghost. He remembered pieces. The feel of Elena's hair between his fingers, her laughter echoing off the marble, the smell of jasmine in their room. But each fragment was wrapped in confusion, overlapping past and present. He found himself in the study, staring at the piano. Without thinking, he played. The same melody from the storm night, but this time, the notes came faster, sharper, collapsing under the weight of something he couldn't control. Elena ran in. "Ethan." He turned, breathing hard. "It's all mixed up. I see you, but I don't know when I'm seeing you. I remember loving you, but I can't trust it's real." She came closer. "It's real. Every bit of it." He stepped back. "Then why does it hurt?" The question broke her. She wanted to hold him, to silence the fear, but he turned away, pressing his palms to his temples. "I need space," he said. "Elena, just let me breathe." She stood there, shaking. "If you walk away now, you'll lose yourself again." He left anyway. That night, the mansion felt colder than it had ever been. Elena sat by the window, watching the rain blur the city lights, whispering to the storm. "Don't take him from me again." Asterisk. 3 days passed. No calls. No messages. The housekeeper said Ethan had checked into one of his downtown hotels to think. Elena didn't chase him. She wrote him a letter instead, a long, trembling confession of love and surrender, and left it on the dining table where he'd see it if he returned. "If love alone could heal memory, you'd never have forgotten me. But love also knows when to let go. If you find peace without me, I'll still be grateful we existed." The morning rain was relentless when Ethan finally drove home. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. Every streetlight flashed pieces of memory at him, Elena's face, the roses, the piano, the vow. By the time he reached the mansion, he was shaking. He found the letter. Read it once. Then again. The words blurred. He whispered, "No. You don't get to let go." He drove through the storm, following instinct more than logic, until the road curved toward the cliffs overlooking the bay, the place she painted when she needed to breathe. Through the sheets of rain, he saw her, a lone figure under a red umbrella, canvas trembling in the wind. He got out of the car, rain soaking him to the bone. "Elena," he shouted. She turned, startled. The umbrella slipped from her hand. Her eyes widened as he came closer, disheveled, breathless, desperate. He stopped a few steps away, chest heaving. I remember. Her lips parted. Ethan. I remember the cafe. The first night. The rain. The way you spilled coffee on me and said, "You'll thank me someday." He laughed, choking on tears. You were right. I thank you for every day after. Lightning flashed behind them, thunder rumbling like applause from the heavens. She shook her head, trembling. Ethan, are you sure? He reached for her hands. I remember the vows. The roses. The pain. And I remember that every time life broke us, you held the pieces until I could fit again. I remember loving you, Elena. I never stopped. The rain poured harder, drenching them both, but neither moved. Elena sobbed against his chest, her fingers gripping his soaked shirt as if anchoring herself to the moment. He cupped her face, pressing his forehead to hers. If I forget again tomorrow, remind me tonight. Because this is the only truth that matters. She laughed through tears. You always say the right thing when it rains. He smiled. Maybe that's why I love storms. He kissed her, hard, desperate, grateful. The kiss wasn't just reunion, it was resurrection. Every forgotten promise, every unspoken apology folded into that moment. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at once, the kind of laughter that comes when you realize you've survived something impossible. The rain softened into a drizzle as they stood at the edge of the cliff, their hearts pounding in the same rhythm. The storm had broken, leaving behind that fragile hush that only comes after something powerful ends and something truer begins. Elena leaned against him, her wet hair clinging to his shirt. His heartbeat thudded steady beneath her ear. For weeks she'd heard that sound only in dreams. Now it was real, grounding her. Let's go home, he whispered. The word home had never sounded more sacred. They drove back in silence. The city glittered through the mist, washed clean by rain. Ethan's hand never left hers on the drive, fingers tracing small circles over her skin, as if reminding himself she was real, that they were both still here. When they reached the mansion, dawn was breaking. The marble floors still reflected the faint glow of the fireplace. Everything looked the same, and yet, somehow, everything was new. Ethan stood in the foyer, taking it all in the photographs, the faint scent of jasmine, the piano in the corner. He turned to her, eyes soft but sure. I've walked through this house 100 times and felt nothing, he said. Now every wall feels alive again. Maybe it wasn't my memory that was missing, maybe it was you. Elena smiled through tears. I never left. He took her hand, guiding her toward the piano. Then let me come back the way I should have. He sat at the keys, motioning for her to sit beside him. She hesitated, then joined him, their shoulders brushing. His fingers touched the piano, and a familiar melody filled the air, soft, slow, reverent. Elena's breath caught. That song. Our first dance, he whispered. I played it wrong that night because I couldn't stop looking at you. She laughed, tears falling freely. You're still looking. He turned to her. How could I not? The song ended, but the silence that followed felt full, not empty, not broken, but whole. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, her wedding ring, which she had taken off after the accident. He must have found it in the study earlier. He held it out to her, palm open. I can't promise I'll never forget again, he said softly. But I can promise that every time I look at you, I'll fall in love with you all over again. Even if it takes 1,000 first times. Her lip trembled as she slid the ring onto her finger. Then I'll remind you as many times as it takes. He leaned in, kissing her, slow this time, not desperate but full of peace. The kind of kiss that sealed something eternal. Outside, the last raindrops glimmered against the window, catching the first light of morning. They spent the day together quietly, walking through the garden, making breakfast side by side, laughing about how burnt the toast was. For once, time didn't feel like a thief, it felt like a gift. That evening, as the sun set, Ethan stood by the window, watching the golden light bathe the city. He spoke without turning. "You know what I realized?" Elena, curled on the couch with a blanket, looked up. "What?" "Everyone keeps talking about memory like it's what makes us who we are. But it's not. It's love. Love is the thing that remembers for us." She smiled softly. "Then we'll never forget again." He came over, knelt beside her, and rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you for waiting for me." "I wasn't waiting," she whispered. "I was loving you." "There's a difference." He laughed quietly, his thumb brushing away a tear from her cheek. "You always were the better half of this story." She tilted her head. "Then promise me something. Anything. If another storm comes, if life ever takes your memory again, promise me you'll listen to the rain." He frowned playfully. "The rain?" She nodded. "Because that's where I'll always be, calling you home." He smiled, pressing his lips to her forehead. "Then I'll never stop listening." The camera of memory pans forward. The mansion looks warmer now, sunlight in every corner, music in the halls. Elena stood at the piano, painting set aside, hair loose over her shoulders. Ethan sat across from her, eyes closed, listening as she played the melody he'd once written for her. He didn't need to remember every detail anymore. He didn't need the past to tell him who he loved. He was living it, every second. When she finished, he opened his eyes and smiled. "Still beautiful." She rose and walked to him, slipping her hands around his neck. "Still mine." He kissed her softly. "Always." The rain began again outside, gentle, cleansing, familiar. Ethan looked toward the window, then back at her. "I used to hate the rain," he said. She laughed. "You love it now." "Because it reminds me of the day I found you again." She touched his cheek. "No, Ethan. It reminds you of the day you remembered yourself." They stood together, watching the rain blur the world into watercolor. He drew her close, whispering words he had once written in a forgotten letter but now said from memory. "If ever I forget, remind me that loving you was the only thing that made sense." And for the first time in a long time, everything truly did. If love could bring back what time has stolen, who would you want it to return to you? Do you believe that love remembers, even when memory fades? Leave a comment below if you believe that real love never forgets.